Phil Duku is Group Digital Portfolio Lead for Digital Transformation at Kingfisher PLC's IT Services, active on major strategic business transformation portfolios, unifying the offer, driving digital capability, and optimizing operational efficiency. In this podcast, we talk to Phil about bringing the digital transformation and sustainability debate to SMEs and learning from major corporations performing well because of it.
Digital transformation and sustainability. And I suppose that the first thing we'll do is actually explain what do we mean by digital transformation, I suppose.
Well, I mean, that's quite a big question. I think traditionally, if you can apply the word traditionally to digital, it's been about replacing manual stuff with digital stuff, whether that's processes, systems, whatever. And it's really, I think, had too much focus on the technology, and actually what we should be talking about is what we do with that technology, how we use it to our advantage. And I think sometimes that bit gets missed. So, IT will traditionally lead on digital technology and transformation. And I'm part of IT, so I think I can say this. We're probably not the best people to be driving that kind of conversation, and it should be a business thing. I think what really is missing is the need to understand why are we doing this, and you can spend a lot of money converting something from a manual process into a digital process, but actually if it's not delivering any benefit, then quite frankly, don't do it. So the key to me is digital transformation is about allowing an organization to understand its customers better, to understand what those customers value, and to shape the organization to deliver that value, thereby, whatever you want to do, increasing sales, increasing engagement, whatever it is. So to me, if you start with it's all about the customer and understanding the customer, what do we need to put in place in order to do that?
So, we've been through a very strange 12 months, and I think we've all had to become more au fait with using technology. So, how do you see the COVID's changed sort of the digital world and how we do business?
Everybody sort of comes out with a cliche that COVID has accelerated our digital transformation, and I don't think that is the case. I think there's sort of many things at play here. So one is obviously people have been forced into isolating, not going into stores or whatever, and therefore they've moved more naturally online, probably a lot quicker than had this COVID thing not played out the way it had. So businesses who have a physical presence, shops or offices, whatever, have had to fall back on this online interaction with their normal customers. So from a retailer, which is my background, it's been about survival. It's been about how do we maintain trade when people are not coming into our stores, and the logical thing is obviously to grow your e-commerce proposition, and that isn't necessarily digital transformation. That's survival, quite frankly. And I think part of the problem with that is you've accelerated one part of your digital transformation, and you've probably had to compromise a lot of the rest of it. So, how have you supported it from a back-end perspective, from a supply chain perspective, from a colleague perspective, and what compromises have you had to make in order to survive? And are you going to actually pause, review what you've done here, make sure that you've not over-compromised, fix a lot of the sort of technical debt. We talked about, the security implications, and I think reshape your digital strategy in order to reflect what has happened, but actually don't just think you have transformed digitally because of COVID.
No, okay, that's interesting. So, what do you think? You just mentioned about security. What do you think are the security implications for business, particularly, as so many of us are now working from home?
So that, well, it depends. That really depends on the organisation. But I think generally that's the only reason that has become more of a risk, I think, for us, all working from home is that people are in a familiar environment. They're probably a bit more relaxed. And so, if a phishing email comes in that appears to be an official email from your CEO or whoever, you're possibly more likely to click on it. I don't know, but I think generally that isn't. I don't think that's the real risk area. I think it's more about, you've made some compromises in order to keep your business afloat. You've probably not been as rigorous in terms of how you've implemented some of the technological solutions, and you may have left some back doors open or whatever. And cyber terrorists, whatever you want to call them, there's a lot of people at play in that area, and they're definitely looking for those weaknesses, actively looking for those weaknesses. And I think unless businesses can shore those up quickly, probably take a lot of things down that they put in place and put it in place properly, there's definitely an ongoing risk there.
I mean, I'm just going back a few years. I mean, we saw more and more tools sort of going on into the cloud, as it were. But a lot of big businesses were quite loath to allow their systems to go on the cloud, and still wanted to retain their hard systems, their own servers, and the rest of it. Do you think the pendulum has now swung more towards the cloud, because actually it's easier to secure stuff via the cloud almost than it is to secure stuff on your own physical servers?
Yes, I think the main driver though has been more about scaling things quickly, which if you've got your hardware on premise, that was really difficult to do. So I think a lot of businesses who had to almost switch their business model on its head because you only had an e-commerce channel, realized they had to scale that very, very, very quickly, and the only realistic way of doing that would have been to move it into the cloud. I think probably those businesses that were reluctant to move into the cloud have seen, A, you've got that benefit, B, those fears about the security side of it have not manifested themselves, and I think there's just a lot more comfort about how to manage your business when half your or more of your systems are in the cloud.
Yeah, because it always seems to me that actually, having a physical server of your own, actually you're quite in quite an unsafe situation almost these days.
Yeah. I used to work at Flybe, and
right.
when I started, they actually had the main servers in the main hangar, and they were literally bringing aircraft into the hangar, and the aircraft ended about a few inches away from this wall, which is behind which was the server. And if they just overshot that, it would have taken out the whole of Flybe. Now, obviously, Flybe is the case in point, but as you say, physically having it there did not make any sense from a resilience perspective.
No, I did a security survey on a business many years ago, and its servers were in an upstairs room. What they hadn't clicked was they actually had a car park underneath the server room. People just drove in and parked their cars there. And when it was pointed out that if the car caught fire, they would lose their whole system. But there was utter panic. Utter panic. Yeah. But it's interesting. So do you think? I mean, we talk about the cyber terrorism, but it seems to me that a lot of it is actually down to just hooliganism, really, cyber hooliganism.
Hooliganism, industrial espionage, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of money to be made out of holding companies ransom, for example.
Absolutely.
So I think you absolutely have to do your due diligence, but I think hopefully the cloud has proved itself at least to be as resilient as having it on-prem, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that where the cloud, where people have broken into cloud systems, they've actually done it through business premises more than anything else.
Yeah.
So it's not, they haven't broken into the cloud, they've broken into the company's system because of poor security.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, because that's the problem. You obviously got those multiple sort of endpoints where if you take your eye off the ball, then absolutely.
Yeah.
And all the offices are empty, of course, now. So they have been. So so there's probably more time for people to try and hack in that way.
But I mean, there was always a lot made about people losing. I mean, in the armed forces, people would lose laptops with highly, delicate information on them. But of course, actually, if the laptop didn't hold anything, and you had to access it, and it was therefore through password protected system. Actually, losing the laptop didn't matter at all because it was of no use. And I'm reminded that when we first, when computers suddenly became part of the real world, and I'm going back in sort of the late 70s and the 80s. And everyone actually in those days, companies had a big server and they had dumb terminals, and in effect, the server was providing a cloud type service to dumb terminals. And then everyone came to PCs and laptops that were doing all the work for them. And then it seems with the cloud, we've gone back almost to the dumb terminal sort of concept.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the heavy lifting possibly from a localized processing. So if you've got a lot of data and you need to analyze it, then that would likely be done locally.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, most people now, and so Kingfisher, who I work for now, is moving to that kind of model again. So
yeah. So your laptop is just a portal to the cloud, and nothing more than that.
Yeah.
Which I find quite interesting.
But it means you can buy Chromebooks instead of high-end laptops, and why would you not do that?
That's right. And you can't put CD-ROMs in them anymore.
No.
Like that. So but just going back to this, what is digital transformation? We had this conversation the other day, and we talked about enablers and data and so on. And I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit more about that.
I think so. Fundamentally, if we go back to that customer kind of concept, most businesses, or a lot of businesses, say the customer is the heart of everything they do, but I'm not sure in reality that's true. I think behind the scenes you've still got very siloed business units who almost are trying to compete with each other, and the customer often gets forgotten. IT will look at the next shiny piece of technology, say, we need to implement this, without real thought as to what value that's going to bring. So I think part of the power of digital transformation is actually pulling all that data together about your customer and being able to tailor your service to them. I think you have to do a lot of work in order to get to that point, and you have to really understand your customer. But I think by having that, and we talked about this digital twin, having your customer personas, I guess, in digital form, not only means you can therefore understand how your customer might react to something, what is actually of value to them, but you can also start to model scenarios and things like that. You can say, well, if persona Fred, if we did this, would they react well? Would they buy more things? Would they do this, that, and the other? And I think it's a way of joining the real world to the online world in a way that gives you that full end-to-end picture of your customer base.
We're talking about this sort of the digital twin. Because it has far wider uses. We talked, so you can create an alternative world within which you can do things, which seem to have really quite exciting opportunities for people.
Yeah, this, so we talked about construction, where you create a digital version of your building or whatever, which is fantastic from a maintenance perspective. Means you're effectively, when you're handing your building over to your client, they effectively get a digital version of it, and they can then work out, maintenance schedules. People can say, well, if I need to access that thing, how do I get to it? And all that can be built into the model. But also you can then start to look at designing buildings around the people who need to use them. And you can try out things, you can model things within it before you actually start building, which is obviously a much better time to do it. And then as you build your physical structure, you can start to evolve that model to reflect how you're building it. And then ultimately, I don't want to sort of go on to the Grenfell thing, but the biggest challenge for upgrading those buildings has been the lack of understanding of how the buildings were constructed in the first place, and so it's costing a lot of money doing a lot of investigation work. Whereas if you had the digital twin, which is happening, you would have been able to have worked out what had gone wrong and fixed it in a more cost-effective and fundamentally quicker way.
No, absolutely. The Grenfell file also brings another sort of element into it, and that was in terms of be able to create a virtual world for firefighters where you actually have captured all the information within the building. A firefighter going into a building, even though they can't see, can see where they are, and therefore can be taken around a building, even though their vision is completely obscured by smoke. Which is quite clever. But I can remember quite a few years ago where they were using virtual reality and this digital twin to train people before they went on board oil platforms. So they could take them around the oil platform and show them where all the safety kit was, the valves were, and so forth. And could then go into the maintenance, as you talked about. So they actually could, somebody with virtual reality could actually show them, which bit to change and so forth, how to do it.
Which obviously is a lot cheaper and more effective than putting somebody onto an oil rig and training them in situ.
No, absolutely. Where do you think we're going with the transformation? Where do you, every time we talk about this, yes, this 12 months, there has been an acceleration in not so much in transformation, but in people using stuff. Most people had never used Zoom 12 months ago. Now everybody uses it, or Google Meets or whatever. Where do you think we're actually going with that? How's it going to play into the place of work in terms? Jobs, for instance, how it's going to affect those?
So I think to sort of go back to that first point, COVID has forced people to become more familiar with technology. I think, as you say, my dad, who's in his 80s, who's suddenly on Zoom and online shopping and all that kind of stuff, and that's something he swore he would never get involved in. So there's a whole group of people that probably businesses have gone, well, there's no point, even trying to get them to move online, who suddenly are being presented with actually, almost all their customers now have engaged with them probably online. So I think it's kind of resetting that bar, I guess, to make sure that as a business that you understand that a lot of the challenges you probably perceived are possibly no longer there, provided you can capitalize on it well. If you can look at that customer and say, well, this person in their 80s, they're likely to happy to do research online still, but they're probably going to want to come into the store. So how do we make sure that whole customer journey is joined up, and so they get the most value out of it from their perspective? I think from a work perspective, it's probably more how do you engage with a workforce, I guess. Not all industries can work from home, but a lot can. How do you engage with your workforce who are working remotely for the most part, making sure that everybody feels part of the team, has access to all the tools they need to do the job and all those kind of things. And I think digital transformation, internal digital transformation, has a huge part to play in that. And I think, if we take COVID as the kind of proof of concept, we've shown it can work, but there are also lots of challenges still. And I think people just need to, as I say, probably reset their strategy to make sure that it includes that whole experience from all stakeholders within their business and outside the business.
One topic which comes up from time to time, because we take for granted that that we can talk like this, and we've got Zoom, we've got Google Meet, but of course it depends on one vital bit of infrastructure, which is a broadband system that works. And of course, in this country currently, broadband does not reach everybody, and a lot of people don't have access to the internet in the way that they now need to. And secondly, it's just been mentioned, that BT are threatening a strike because of pay, and therefore the internet could suddenly find itself not working. Do you think the time has come for broadband and the internet to be treated as a key security, a piece of security infrastructure within the country, and is treated in the same way as power and water?
Absolutely. We jokingly said, the access to the internet has become a human right. From certainly, as I say, my teenage daughter would absolutely assert that, and I think I agree with you. There's a potential for a sort of two-tier society: those that have access to good internet, and those that I moved recently from a village into a town, and I kind of had accepted how bad broadband was in the village, and I sort of come here and it's like, wow, I can do all this stuff. But yeah, there's obviously, there's probably I don't know what you'd even call it, but an internet kind of poverty where you've seen certain families whose children were homeschooling who haven't had access to proper internet, and they're all sharing a single mobile phone to try and do all their homework, and that absolutely needs to be addressed. I agree with you from a societal resilience perspective that we need to have security around that. I think, as you say, if the internet stopped working tomorrow, quite frankly, the whole world would grind to a halt. So absolutely, it needs to be factored in as part of all those planning.
Absolutely, because I mean it's part of the social structure now as well as part of the business structure, and so and I'm just wondering whether that's something government seems to be 10 years behind that concept. It seems to me.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why. I mean, I know it's not an easy thing to solve, is it? But ultimately, if we want to be a thriving, post-Brexit economy, we need to be connected to the world, and quite frankly, especially as more people are going to be working from home probably on a more regular basis, we need to make sure that all works properly, and we can only do that through having decent broadband connection across the whole country. Yeah,
I mean, and houses being designed to work in as well to some extent, modern housing, which I think we have a fairly poor record on in this country. And again, there's no tie-up between developments and things like internet and structure and so on. It's quite bizarre.
And the interesting thing was, of course, the drive for open plan accommodation, and people are going, I can't work here because it's too noisy. So, but that's a great opportunity for B&Q, by the way, who do internal partitions for houses now. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I just think it's quite, I do worry about this though, about the fact that the internet and the broadband is, it is almost a human right, because it's very difficult to function in any way, shape, or form without it. Mobile phones are fine, but it's an expensive way of doing it.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
Exactly. Yeah. And even then, you don't, like I say, in the village we lived, this mobile phone signal was rubbish as well. So you literally have no chance.
I'm just wondering if there are any questions, Harmeet.
Yeah, there's a few. Me and Caux will take it in turns. Yeah. This one was pretty much asked as soon as you spoke, Philip. It's from Leanne, so it's way back. It says, do you find most companies don't have a digital strategy, and are they reactive?
I think a lot of businesses say they have a digital strategy. I'm not sure whether they really do. I think people understand they need to be thinking about this digital thing, but as I say, I'm not sure people truly understand the implications of it and have got something formal in place. But yeah, I think certainly the larger businesses do. Oh, lost you.
Yeah, let's go. Judy has actually asked quite a few questions. Let's start with the first one. Digital technology is great, but has opened up the world to a real dark side in terms of behaviors, manipulation, etc. How do you think these things can ever be controlled?
That's a big question, isn't it?
How long have we got?
I mean, the easy answer is I don't think they ever will be controlled. I think it's probably more about education. People need to understand, that there is still a moral code, I guess, around these things, and it's going to be really difficult. And the more people that start to use it, the harder it's going to be, because there's no boundaries. Let's face it. So national laws don't truly apply. International law is hard to enforce. And I think it's going to have to be almost, the people who use it are going to have to almost self-police. And I don't know, honestly, where it's going to go.
Now, we've opened Pandora's box, haven't we?
Yeah.
There is another question, but I'm going to come in here. I mean, I was a police officer once upon a time for about 4 years. And I guess the question is going to lead down to how does cyber police look? You did say, obviously, you're going to have to self-police. one of the things from the police I know is that just because they're a big organization, things take a lot longer to be put in place. There is a department for online fraud, cybersecurity, but they can never keep up with the speed of cybercrime. I mean, what are your sort of initial thoughts on the fix from a policing side?
Well, I think there's kind of two bits in there. There's the criminal activity, which I think absolutely needs it probably needs a global solution too, because if the cyber criminal's sitting in Russia and they're effectively attacking somebody in the UK,
not to point a finger, of course.
They're listening in, it's fine. I think that is almost impossible to tackle directly, unless there is some international agreement on how to do that. But that requires the coordination and signing up of all the countries who are likely to be involved in it. And I can't believe that some of the countries where these attacks might originate from are likely to sign up to that. Right. I'm not naming one now. But I think there's also the kind of poor behaviour, whatever you want to call it, and then that's the bit I think that probably society needs to be self-policing in, because I think there's a lot of activity that isn't what you could fully describe as criminal, but actually it's pretty appalling and has a massive effect on people.
Bullying, online bullying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been said that that part of the problem, particularly amongst young people, is you have young people who are technologically very savvy, but they have not got the maturity to understand what they're doing with that technology at times.
Yeah,
which leads to excess.
Yeah, and of course they're more technologically savvy than their parents, and and so it's again really difficult as a parent to understand exactly what your child is up to and do anything about it, even if you did understand it.
Yeah, let's go. Adam has a good question. A classic dilemma for software engineers is where the business thinks they need X, Y, Z, but in fact the optimal solution is different, and the firm ends up building the wrong product. In light of this, what advice would you give to companies to avoid digitally transforming in the wrong direction?
Well, yeah, but that's all. That's not just applicable to digital transformation, is it? So I think. And I have this conversation a lot with people, and it's about defining the need without moving into the solution space. So I think IT absolutely has a huge part to play in producing the solution to the problem, but actually defining the problem has to sit within the business. And if you can separate those two things out as much as possible initially, then I think you can get to the right solution to solve the right problem. But the huge caveat is that business, IT need to understand the customer, and so that the solution doesn't go in the wrong direction. But equally, the business and IT, who are usually in separate departments, need to work really closely together, and you need to make sure there's those really, really short and quick feedback loops. And that you test as you move along.
Mm.
Yeah. The next question is Julie, the second one, and it says other things like terrorism, drug dealers, traffickers, etc. What actually is the dark web?
The kind of the easy answer, which is probably not really fair. So the dark web is a part, because the problem is with the internet, there's parts of it that are very public and very accessible, and there's other parts that are completely locked off, which is also called the deep web. And there's parts which criminals hang out in and do all manner of things. And ultimately, the dark web is the bit where a lot of criminal activity lies. But it's not purely that, and that's part of the problem as well. So it's almost impossible to police. The likes of Google and whatever do not do searches within the dark web because they don't have access to it. So what goes on in there is very hidden.
How do you get into it? Or shouldn't I be asking that question? We'll take that one.
No. You don't want to go there.
It's been recorded. Maybe when we stop recording.
Yeah.
If there are any, Julie's written very scary. If there are any more questions, do drop down. I've got one more, do drop them down if there is any more. And it's around, as we're going towards more digital. You said, with COVID going on, those retailers that wouldn't have traditionally had e-commerce, and even these days with children being more on technology. What are your thoughts from a social perspective? Is it taking away social skills from humans? And the second one that always comes up is it taking away jobs as well?
So the first one, hey, I don't think I've ever attended so many of these kinds of group sessions as I have since first lockdown. So it definitely there is a risk that if you sort of lock yourself away in your room and you just interact via messaging and things like that. But I think actually it's opened things up even more. I think it's allowed society to carry on. How else have people been able to keep in touch with their relatives when they couldn't travel? The phone's great, but actually this I think has been amazing. And I, like I say, I wouldn't be here if on this show, obviously, if it wasn't for for digital technology. Feels like a show, Truman Show maybe. So I think if it's handled well and people use this face-to-face stuff rather than sort of sitting in a darkened room somewhere, then I think it can be really positive and beneficial, and actually open up the world, which I think is also really important.
I think one of the things that we found, with the mastermind is that actually people have joined that actually find things like networking and so on actually very intimidating, and this has created quite a safe space for people.
Yeah.
Communicate.
Yeah. And I found that things like meetings, for example, it seems to democratize meetings a bit more. So the director doesn't hold court. It is a bit more. Everybody feels they can speak. I mean, not. You still have to work at it. But I think actually it has made things a lot better from that perspective.
Yeah, and I think sort of social etiquette on these sort of events has become fairly well established and so on.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the second part, Hamid? I missed that.
Yeah, second part is has digital taken away jobs?
So no is the short answer. However, I think jobs have changed, and I think there is a potential danger that certain sections of society who are currently working in jobs that can be automated, for example, could be negatively impacted by that. And I think that's the bit that needs a bit more thought around the social engineering side of things, and so that can be planned and there can be transition in place rather than leaving sections of society who are unable to work because basically their job has been replaced by a robot or whatever, and I think that's something that I don't feel is being thought about enough at the moment.
No, I mean, I think for me one of the interesting facts, the fear about job going, but because of the increase, for instance, on online shopping, we've seen the rise therefore of the distribution and logistics organisations. Amazon obviously is one. They're well known, but there are lots of others as well, and that's created a lot of opportunities. And although Amazon depends heavily on robotics within its warehousing, but what that done is actually it's taken away some of the heavy lift stuff. So that actually it allows people who couldn't lift heavy boxes to actually go and work in a warehouse. So I think it opens up, and they employ thousands of people, some of them extremely highly qualified, and of course I guess it's created a lot of technology-based jobs as well to Amazon. Yeah.
Which is where I think overall, the net change is probably fairly neutral, but it's actually the skills that people need to do these new jobs that are based around digital that I think needs to be addressed. From an education perspective. As well as anything else.
Yeah, within Amazon, everyone that works within the warehouse is using an interface.
Yeah.
Interfacing with the technology.
Yeah, exactly. And some people, traditionally have not been comfortable with that, and they've kind of been forced into it.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see is the best answer, but hopefully it'll be a little bit more planned than tragic for some.
It's been a bit ad hoc this last 12 minutes, I guess.
Yeah.
Great. Phil, thanks ever so much. I think you've taken us into the world of digital and to get a better understanding, if you like, from a grassroots perspective, which I think is really useful, because I think we get a bit blasé about it and we talk about it without actually fully understanding some of the ramifications. So thanks for that, Phil. That's
Brilliant.
great.
My
Very much
pleasure.
indeed.
Thanks, Mike. Cheers.
Cheers.